Amara Kendall strides off the Chicago-bound plane, briefcase clutched, her $600 million deal sealed in her mind. A security guard snatches her arm, barking she's in the wrong cabin. Her protest dies as he drags her past whispering passengers, his smirk dripping with disdain. They don't know she's the deal's backbone. This isn't a mix-up, it's a fuse lit to torch an empire. Her world and theirs will never be the same. What would you do if power turned against you? Before diving in, share where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's episode will leave you speechless. Amara Kendall's heels clicked against the scuffed linoleum of Chicago O'Hare's security office, a windowless box buried deep in Terminal 1. The air smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy, thick with the hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. She stood rigid, briefcase still clutched from the plane, her tailored navy blazer creased where the guard's grip had lingered. Her pulse thrummed, not from fear but from the sharp sting of what had just happened. Dragged off a first-class cabin like a stowaway, her protests swallowed by the guard's sneer and the passengers' whispers. Now, here she was, facing a stone-faced officer behind a metal desk, his badge glinting under the harsh light. His name tag read P. Larson, and his eyes barely lifted from the screen as he typed, each keystroke deliberate, as if her presence was an inconvenience he'd rather erase. She set her briefcase on the floor, careful not to let it touch the grime-streaked tiles, and straightened her spine. "I need my boarding pass reinstated," she said, voice steady, each word measured to cut through the haze of dismissal. "I was removed from first class without cause, seat 1A flight. To Zurich, departing at 8:30. Larson's fingers paused, hovering over the keyboard, but he didn't look up. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if her clarity was a puzzle he hadn't expected. "Name?" he asked, tone flat, like he was reading a script. "Amara Kendall," she replied, sliding her Apex Vanguard ID across the desk, a sleek placard with her title, Chief Executive Officer, embossed in silver. The card caught the light, its weight a quiet testament to her power, but Larson barely glanced at it. He tapped her name into the system, his lips tightening as the screen loaded. Outside the office's frosted glass door, the terminal buzzed. Faintly, muffled announcements, rolling suitcases, the clatter of a coffee cart. But inside the silence stretched taut, broken only by the soft click of Larson's mouse. Amara's eyes flicked to the corner, where a second guard leaned against, the wall arms crossed, watching her with the kind of scrutiny that felt less like protocol and more like judgment. She recognized him from the plane, the one who'd grabbed her arm, his fingers digging just enough to bruise. His uniform was crisp, but his smirk lingered, a shadow of the same arrogance he'd worn when he'd hauled her through the jet bridge. She forced her gaze back to Larson, refusing to give the guard the satisfaction of her unease. The officer leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowing. "Systems showing a flag on your ticket," he said finally, his voice carrying a hint. "Of accusation. Potential fraud. We'll need to verify." Amara's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure, her years of boardroom battles kicking in. "Fraud?" she repeated, letting the word hang sharp and heavy. "I booked that flight 3 weeks ago, paid in full, first class, through my corporate account. Check the transaction." Larson's eyes flicked to her ID for the first time, but instead of scanning it, he pushed it back toward her, his fingers brushing the edge as if it were contaminated. "Doesn't matter what you say," he said, leaning back in his chair. "System says what it says. Step aside, we'll sort this." Before Amara could respond, the door swung open, and a white passenger in a charcoal suit strode past her, his boarding pass already extended. He was mid-40s, with the polished ease of someone who navigated airports like a second home. Larson's demeanor shifted instantly. His shoulders relaxed, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Good morning, sir," he said, taking the man's pass and scanning it with a quick beep. "First class 1B, you're all set." The man nodded, barely acknowledging Amara as he slipped his pass back into his wallet and walked out, his leather shoes tapping a confident rhythm. Amara's stomach twisted, not at the man's indifference but at the stark contrast. Her credentials ignored, his accepted without question. The guard in the corner shifted his weight, his smirk widening, as if he'd caught the same discrepancy and savored it. She stepped closer to the desk, her voice dropping to a controlled edge. "You just cleared him in 10 seconds. Same flight, same cabin. What's the difference?" Larson's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Random checks," he said, his tone daring her to push further. "Not random if it's—" "Only me," she countered, sliding her ID back toward him. "Run it, now." Larson hesitated, his fingers hovering again, but the weight of her stare seemed to tip the balance. He swiped the card through the reader, and the screen blinked green, her profile loading in crisp detail. Amara Kendall, Apex Vanguard CEO, verified account, no prior flags. For a moment, triumph flickered in her chest. She'd forced the truth to surface, carved a crack in their wall of dismissal. But before Larson could speak, a radio on his belt crackled, the voice sharp and commanding. "Hold Kendall, additional screening required." Amara's breath caught, her victory souring instantly. Larson's eyes darted to the radio, then back to her, his earlier hesitation gone. "Bag check," he said, standing and gesturing toward her briefcase. "Open it." The guard from the plane stepped forward, his boots heavy on the tiles, and Amara's pulse spiked. "This is my personal property," she said, gripping the briefcase's handle. "You need a warrant for that." Larson's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Not in here, you don't," he said. "Airport security, we make the rules." The guard loomed closer, his presence a physical weight, and Amara calculated her options. Refuse, and they'd escalate. Cuffs, maybe worse. Comply, and she'd lose ground. Her dignity chipped away in this sterile cage. She chose the lesser wound, snapping open the briefcase with a flick of her wrists. Inside, neatly organized, were her tablet, a leather notebook, and a sealed folder marked Apex. Vanguard, Zurich acquisition. Larson reached for the folder without asking, tearing the seal with a careless rip. Amara's voice cut through the air. "Those are confidential. You're not cleared to touch them." He ignored her, flipping through the pages. Financial. Projections, signatures, timelines for a $600 million deal that could reshape her firm's global reach. His fingers smudged the edges, and one page tore under his grip, a jagged gash across a revenue chart. Amara's hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms. "Careful," she said, the word a warning wrapped in restraint. Larson didn't. "Look up," but the guard chuckled, a low sound that crawled under her skin. "Looks like a lot of numbers for someone causing trouble," Larson muttered, tossing the folder back into the briefcase. A few loose pages fluttered to the floor, and Amara knelt to retrieve them, her knees brushing the dirty tiles. Outside, through the glass, she glimpsed travelers passing. Briefcases, earbuds, lives uninterrupted. None stopped to look. None saw the quiet violence unfolding in this room. Larson sat back down, typing again, but his radio crackled once more. The same voice, colder now. "Kendall's bag, suspicious contents, routed to cargo for inspection." Amara stood, the torn pages clutched in her hand. "Suspicious," she snapped. "You just saw everything. It's documents, a tablet, nothing else." Larson shrugged, already turning back to his screen. "Not my call," he said. The guard stepped forward, snatching the briefcase before she could react. "We'll handle it," he said, his smirk now a full grin. He carried it toward a side door, where a conveyor belt hummed, leading to the terminal's underbelly. Amara lunged after him, but Larson's voice stopped her. "Stay put, Miss Kendall, unless you want more problems." She froze, her heart pounding, every instinct screaming to fight. But the room was a trap, 2 against 1, cameras angled just wrong enough to miss their overreach. The door slammed shut behind the guard, her briefcase gone, swallowed by the system's gears. She turned back to Larson, her voice low, lethal. "You know who I am. You know that bag holds sensitive material. This isn't random." Larson met her gaze for the first time, his eyes hard but flickering with something, uncertainty maybe, or fear of what he'd started. "Take it up with customer service," he said, pointing to the door. "We're done here." Amara grabbed the torn pages, stuffing them into her coat pocket, and strode out, her steps sharp against the linoleum. The terminal's noise hit her like a wave. Announcements, laughter, the clink of coins at a kiosk. But beneath it, she felt eyes on her, not from passengers, but from somewhere higher, unseen. Victor Hensley, the name she'd overheard on the radio, was pulling strings she couldn't yet trace. She'd forced Larson to acknowledge her ID, cracked his facade for a moment, but the victory was hollow. Her bag, her proof, her leverage, gone. And worse, they'd touched her deal, her life's work, with careless hands, tearing it like it was nothing. As she moved toward the customer service desk, her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant, oblivious to the chaos. "Zurich team ready, docs prepped?" Amara's throat tightened. She didn't reply, couldn't yet. The terminal stretched before her, a maze of glass and steel, and every step felt like walking into a storm she hadn't seen coming. Her deal was still alive in her mind, but out here in this place she was fighting something bigger, something that saw her skin before her power and wanted her erased. She squared her shoulders, her mind already mapping the next move. They'd taken her bag, but they hadn't taken her. Amara Kendall navigated the crowded corridors of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her torn deal documents crinkling in her coat pocket with every step. The terminal pulsed with life, families hauling suitcases, business travelers tapping phones, baristas shouting orders over the hiss of espresso machines, but to her, it felt like a battlefield, each glance a potential ambush. Her briefcase was gone, spirited away to cargo by a guard's smirk and a radio's crackle, but she refused to let that wound slow her. The customer service desk loomed ahead, a sleek counter framed by glowing airline logos, promising help she doubted would come. Her pulse steadied, her mind sharpening like a blade. They'd humiliated her on the plane, rifled her belongings in that dingy security office, but she was still standing, still Amara Kendall, CEO of Apex Vanguard. They'd learn that soon enough. She approached the desk, where a clerk in a navy vest typed with mechanical precision. The name tag read K. Reynolds, and her eyes flicked up briefly, registering Amara with the kind of detached scrutiny reserved for lost luggage. Amara set her torn pages on the counter, their jagged edges a silent accusation. "I need my first-class seat reinstated," she said, her voice firm but calm, honed from years of commanding boardrooms. "Flight to Zurich, 8:30, seat 1A. And I need my briefcase back from cargo. It was taken without consent." Reynolds stopped typing, her fingers hovering, and tilted her head as if Amara's words were a foreign dialect. "Name and confirmation number," she said, already turning back to her screen, her tone suggesting the request was a formality, not a priority. "Amara Kendall," she replied, sliding her phone forward, the reservation email open in crisp detail. "Confirmation's there, paid 3 weeks ago, corporate account." Reynolds glanced at the screen, her lips pursing as she tapped keys with deliberate slowness. The terminal's noise swirled around them, gate calls, a child's laughter, the clatter of a dropped coffee cup, but Amara's focus stayed locked on the clerk, watching for the telltale signs of dismissal she'd already tasted twice today. Her stomach knotted, not from doubt but from the memory of Larson's smirk in the security office, the white passenger's effortless pass, the guard's careless tear through her deal papers. She braced for the next blow, her body tense but her face unreadable. Reynolds leaned closer to her monitor, her brow creasing. "There's an issue," she said, her voice clipped, as if Amara had caused it. "Your seat 1A was reassigned, overbooking." Amara's breath hitched, but she kept her gaze steady. "Overbooking?" she repeated, letting the word linger, sharp enough to cut. "I confirmed that seat yesterday. Check the logs." Reynolds hesitated, her fingers stalling, and Amara pressed harder. "Run it now." The clerk tapped again, faster this time, and the screen blinked, pulling up Amara's record. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe this was a glitch, a fixable error. Reynolds squinted, then nodded. "Okay, I see it. Looks like a system mix-up." "Let me escalate this," Amara exhaled, her shoulders easing slightly. A win, however small, felt like oxygen after the suffocation of the security office. She glanced at the counter, where a stack of boarding passes sat neatly clipped, and allowed herself a fleeting thought of Zurich. The deal, the handshake, the $600 million pivot her firm was poised to make. But before Reynolds could print a new pass, a shadow crossed the counter, A white businessman in a charcoal pinstripe suit stepped up beside Amara, his leather satchel swinging carelessly. He was late 40s with a Rolex glinting on his wrist and the kind of entitled ease that parted crowds without effort. "Need my upgrade processed," he said, sliding his boarding pass forward without looking at Amara. "First class, Zurich flight." Reynolds's demeanor shifted instantly. Her posture straightened and a practiced smile curved her lips. "Of course, sir," she said, scanning his pass with a quick beep. "You're set for 1A. Enjoy your flight." The man smirked, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face as he tucked the pass into his jacket and strode off, his satchel brushing Amara's arm without apology. She froze, the air in her lungs turning to ice. 1A, her seat. Her victory, snatched away in seconds, handed to him like a prize he hadn't earned. The terminal seemed to tilt, the noise fading to a dull roar as she turned back to Reynolds, her voice low, lethal. "That was my seat. You just gave it away." Reynolds's demeanor shifted instantly. Her posture straightened and a practiced smile curved her lips. "Of course, sir," she said, scanning his pass with a quick beep. "You're set for 1A. Enjoy your flight." The man smirked, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face as he tucked the pass into his jacket and strode off, his satchel brushing Amara's arm without apology. She froze, the air in her lungs turning to ice. 1A. Her seat, her victory, snatched away in seconds, handed to him like a prize he hadn't earned. The terminal seemed to tilt, the noise fading to a dull roar as she turned back to Reynolds, her voice low, lethal. "That was my seat. You just gave it away." Reynolds blinked, her smile faltering, but she recovered quickly, tapping her screen as if it held all the answers. "System reassigned it," she said, avoiding Amara's eyes. "Nothing I can do once it's locked." Amara leaned forward, her palms pressing against the counter's cold edge. "You saw my reservation. You admitted it was a mix-up. Fix it." Reynolds hesitated, her fingers twitching, and for a moment, Amara thought she'd cracked through. The clerk sighed, pulling up the seating chart and muttered, "Let me try a manual override." She typed rapidly, the screen flashing green, and Amara's heart lifted. She was close, so close to reclaiming what was hers. But then Reynolds's radio buzzed, a sharp crackle slicing through the moment. A man's voice, smooth and commanding, spilled out. "Reynolds, hold Kendall's profile, reassigned to economy. Manifest update." Amara's blood ran cold. She didn't need to hear the name to know who it was. Victor Hensley, the same shadow from the security office, pulling strings she couldn't see. Reynolds's face tightened, but she complied, her fingers flying across the keys. The screen blinked red, and a new boarding pass spat out from the printer, its ink still wet. Reynolds slid it toward Amara without meeting her gaze. "Row 35, seat C," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Economy. That's what's available." Amara stared at the pass, the numbers mocking her. 35C, a middle seat wedged between strangers, far from the premium cabin she'd paid for, fought for. Her hand trembled as she took it, the paper crumpling slightly under her grip. "This isn't a mix-up," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "This is deliberate." Reynolds looked away, busying herself with a stack of forms, but the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. Amara's mind raced, piecing together the pattern, the guard's grip, Larson's torn pages. Now this. Hensley wasn't just targeting her. He was dismantling her piece by piece, stripping her of every marker of power. She stepped back from the counter, the boarding pass a weight in her hand, and scanned the terminal. Travelers flowed past, oblivious, but she felt the weight of unseen eyes. Cameras, maybe, or Hensley's lackeys watching her every move. The businessman's smirk lingered in her mind, his easy claim to her seat a mirror of every slight she'd faced today. Her race, not her resume, defined her here. She wanted to scream, to flip the counter, to demand Hensley face her in person. But she swallowed it all, channeling the rage into something sharper. Strategy. They thought they'd broken her, but they'd only lit a fuse. As she turned toward the gate, her phone buzzed, a calendar alert for her Zurich meeting now just hours away. The deal felt distant, fragile, like a dream slipping through her fingers. But Amara Kendall didn't fold. She'd built Apex Vanguard from nothing, clawed her way through boardrooms that didn't want her. This desk, this clerk, this Hensley, they were just another hurdle. She'd find her bag, reclaim her seat, and bury them all. The terminal stretched before her, a gauntlet she'd run before. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked on, her heels a defiant drumbeat against the chaos. If Amara's fight against this injustice strikes a chord, tap 1 in the comments to stand with her, hit that like button, and subscribe to catch every twist in her battle. Imagine losing what you've earned in a heartbeat. Could you keep your cool like she did? Drop a 2 if you think she's about to turn the tables, and let us know what you'd do in her shoes. When the system pushes you down, how do you rise? Comment 3 if you believe she'll make them pay and stay locked in for what's next. She's headed to the elite lounge, but will it be salvation or another trap? Amara Kendall wove through the bustling chaos of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, the crumpled economy boarding pass in her pocket, a bitter reminder of her demotion from first class. Row 35, seat C, middle seat, economy, a deliberate slap after her fight at the customer service desk. The terminal's glass walls reflected a blur of travelers, briefcases swinging, headphones blaring, lives untouched by the invisible war she was fighting. Her torn deal documents, salvaged from the security office, pressed against her ribs inside her coat, their jagged edges a quiet pulse of urgency. She needed her briefcase back, her seat restored, her power reclaimed, but first, she needed a lifeline. The Apex Elite Lounge loomed ahead, its frosted doors promising sanctuary, a place where her status as CEO of Apex Vanguard should still hold weight. Her heels struck the tiles with purpose, each step a defiance against the system that kept trying to erase her. The lounge entrance glowed softly, its sleek design a stark contrast to the terminal's frenetic hum. Polished chrome framed the doors, and a digital reader blinked beside a sign that read, Apex Elite Members Only. Amara pulled her membership card from her wallet, a platinum rectangle with her name etched in gold, linked to an account she'd maintained flawlessly for years. She tapped it against the reader, expecting the familiar chime of access. Instead, the screen flashed red, a harsh buzz cutting through the air. Access denied, it blinked, the words cold and final. Amara's stomach twisted, but she tapped again, slower, deliberate. Red again, buzz again. A knot of dread tightened in her chest, the memory of her downgraded seat and stolen briefcase flashing like warning lights. Behind the reception desk, a young woman in a crisp navy blazer looked up, her name tag reading S. Carter. Her expression was polite but guarded, the kind of practiced neutrality that hid judgment. "Can I assist you?" Carter asked, her voice smooth but distant, as if Amara were a stranger who'd wandered too far. Amara slid her card across the counter, her fingers steady despite the storm inside. "This should work," she said, her tone calm, commanding. "Amara Kendall, Apex Vanguard, check my account." Carter took the card, her eyes flicking over it briefly before typing into her terminal. The screen's glow reflected off her face, and Amara caught a flicker of something. Hesitation, maybe, or recognition of a name that carried weight. The lounge doors slid open, and a white couple in tailored coats breezed past, their own cards chiming green without a second glance. From Carter. The man adjusted his cufflinks, murmuring about a delayed flight, while the woman scrolled her phone, oblivious to Amara's silent battle. Their ease, their unquestioned access, hit like a blade, another reminder of the rules that bent for some and broke for others. Amara's jaw tightened, but she kept her gaze on Carter, refusing to let the moment fracture her focus. "Well," she prompted, her voice a quiet demand. Carter's fingers paused, her lips pursing as she studied the screen. "There's an issue," she said finally. Her tone clipped, as if Amara had triggered it. "Your membership's been cancelled. Non-payment." Amara's breath caught, a sharp sting of disbelief slicing through her. "Non-payment," she repeated, the word heavy with accusation. "That's impossible. My account's on auto-renewal, corporate billing, no lapses." "Check again." Carter's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Amara, a flicker of unease crossing her face. The system shows a delinquency notice, she said, her voice softening, almost apologetic. Sent last week. Amara leaned forward, her palms, pressing against the counter's cool surface. I received no notice. Run the payment history now. Carter hesitated, her fingers hovering, but the weight of Amara's stare pushed her to comply. She typed rapidly, pulling up a detailed log, and for a moment Amara saw it. Her account pristine, payments cleared through last month, no flags, no debts. A spark of triumph flared in her chest. She'd caught the lie, forced the truth into the open. There, she said, pointing to the screen. No delinquency, override the block. Carter nodded, her fingers moving to key in a code, and Amara allowed herself a breath, imagining the lounge's leather chairs, the quiet hum of power where she could regroup, call her team, and start clawing back what she'd lost. But before Carter could finish, her headset crackled, a low voice spilling out, sharp and unmistakable. Carter, stall Kendall. Flag her as a disturbance. Security's en route. Amara's blood ran cold. Victor Hensley, his name unspoken but his shadow everywhere, tightening the noose. Carter's face froze, her fingers stalling mid-keystroke, and she glanced at Amara with a mix of guilt and fear. The lounge doors hissed open again, but this time 2 security guards stepped through, their boots heavy on the marble floor. The taller one, badge glinting, J. Torres, fixed his eyes on Amara, his hand resting casually on his radio. Ms. Kendall, he said, his voice loud enough to turn heads in the terminal beyond. You're causing a disturbance. Step away from the desk. Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't move, her gaze locked on Carter. Finish the override, she said, her voice low, urgent. Carter's hands trembled, but she shook her head, whispering, I can't, they'll fire me. The second guard, shorter with a scar above his brow, stepped closer, his presence a physical wall. Let's go, he said, gesturing toward the terminal. Don't make this harder. Amara's mind raced, every instinct screaming to fight, to demand her place. But the guard's stance, hands near belts, eyes hard, warned of escalation. She'd seen this before, not in boardrooms but in the stories of her youth, her father's quiet warnings about systems that punished defiance. The couple from earlier lingered near the lounge's coffee bar, watching now, their phones angled, just enough to capture her shame. Other travelers slowed, their curiosity a spotlight on her isolation. She was Amara Kendall, CEO, dealmaker, but here she was just a black woman, out of place, unwanted. The weight of it pressed against her. Ribs, but she refused to crack. She stepped back from the counter, her card still in Carter's hand, and faced Torres. This isn't a disturbance, she said, her voice steady, cutting through the terminal's hum. This is theft. My membership, my seat, my bag. You're stripping me of what's mine. Torres's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. Just gestured again, more forcefully. Amara calculated, push harder and they'd cuff her, spin it as resistance. Retreat, and she'd lose more ground. She chose the narrow path between, turning to Carter one last time. You know this is wrong, she said, soft but piercing. Remember that. Carter looked away, her hands retreating to her lap, and Amara felt the sting of betrayal, not personal but systemic, another cog turning against her. The guards flanked, her guiding her away from the lounge, their steps a deliberate march that drew eyes from every corner. Travelers whispered, some pointing, others pretending not to see, but the weight of their stares was a physical thing, pressing against her skin. She kept her head high, her posture unbroken, but inside rage and humiliation churned, a fire she banked for later. The lounge doors slid shut behind her, their chime a mocking farewell, and she was back in the terminal's chaos, alone again. Her membership, her sanctuary gone, not by error but by design, Hensley's hand tightening its grip. As she moved toward a quieter corner, her phone buzzed, a text from her Zurich contact, oblivious to her unraveling world. Boardroom set. For 9 p.m., need your final sign-off. Her throat tightened, the deal's fragility hitting hard. $600 million, years of work, hung by a thread, and she was fighting for scraps, a seat, a card, her dignity. But Amara didn't bend. She'd faced hostile takeovers, skeptical investors, rooms that doubted her before she spoke. This was just another fight, uglier, rawer, but not bigger than her. She needed a new plan, a way to reach her team, to turn this trap into a weapon. The lounge was a dead end, but the terminal was wide, full of cracks she could exploit. She scanned the crowd, her eyes catching a digital kiosk advertising private Wi-Fi zones. Secure, anonymous, a lifeline to Apex Vanguard's servers. If she could log in, rally her team, she'd have a fighting chance. Her heels turned, her path set, but a chill ran down her spine, the sense of being watched stronger now. Hensley wasn't done. The guards' radios had crackled as she'd left, their voices low, urgent. She was flagged, marked, a target in a game she hadn't chosen. The terminal stretched before her, a labyrinth of glass and lies, and every step felt like a dare. She took it, her resolve a blade against the chaos, ready to carve her way out. Amara Kendall slipped into a quieter corner of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her heels muffled against the worn carpet, each step a calculated retreat from the Apex Elite Lounge's stinging rejection. The frosted doors of that sanctuary had slammed shut, her platinum card rendered useless by a fabricated non-payment flag, and the guards' heavy boots still echoed in her mind, their accusation of disturbance a fresh wound. The terminal buzzed around her. Travelers, weaving through with coffee cups and rolling bags, their lives untouched by the invisible net tightening around her. Her torn deal documents tucked inside her coat felt heavier now, a fragile tether to the $600 million Zurich acquisition she was fighting to save. Her first-class seat was gone, her briefcase lost to cargo, her lounge access revoked, but she refused to break. She needed a foothold, a way to reach her team at Apex Vanguard, and the digital kiosk ahead, advertising private Wi-Fi zones, glimmered like a lifeline in the chaos. The kiosk stood near a row of vending machines, its screen flashing promises of secure connections for business travelers. Amara's pulse quickened, not with hope but with urgency. If she could log into Apex's servers, she could alert her team, pull records, and start dismantling the lies piling against her. She settled into the booth, its plastic chair creaking under her weight, and powered on her tablet, the last piece of tech she still controlled. The terminal's noise faded, gate calls, a toddler's cry, the clink of coins, replaced by the soft hum of the tablet's fan. She tapped in her credentials, her fingers swift, expecting the familiar dashboard of Apex Vanguard's system. Instead, the screen blinked red, a stark message flashing. Unauthorized user access denied. Amara's breath caught, her stomach lurching as if the floor had dropped. She tried again, slower, checking each character, username, password, two-factor code, all correct. Read again, denied again. Her heart pounded, a cold sweat prickling her neck. This wasn't a glitch. It was surgical, a deliberate cut to her lifeline. She glanced around, half expecting Victor Hensley's shadow to loom nearby, but the terminal offered only strangers, none watching, yet all complicit in their indifference. Her eyes flicked to a nearby booth, where a white executive in a grey suit tapped away on his laptop, his screen glowing with spreadsheets, no barriers, no flags. He logged in effortlessly, his VPN connecting without a hitch, while Amara sat locked out, her empire slipping through her fingers. She switched to her corporate email, hoping to ping her assistant, but the same message taunted her. Unauthorized user. Her VPN, her cloud drive, even her personal account. Every door slammed shut, digital bolts sliding into place. The air grew thick, her chest tightening, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. She rebooted the tablet, tried a guest network, anything to bypass the block, but each attempt met the same red wall. The executive glanced up, his eyes skimming her with mild curiosity before returning to his work, his privilege a quiet contrast to her erasure. Amara's nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her against the rising panic. She wasn't just fighting for a seat or a lounge, she was fighting for her voice, her power, her existence in a system that saw her skin and marked her for deletion. Desperate, she pulled a backup device from her coat, a slim burner phone she kept for emergencies, unlinked to Apex's network. Its battery was low, but it connected to the kiosk's Wi-Fi, bypassing the tablet's lockout. Her fingers flew, logging into a secondary Apex server through a backdoor protocol she'd designed herself. The screen flickered, then loaded, a flood of relief washing over her as the dashboard appeared. Files, contacts, her team's updates, all within reach. She drafted a message to her chief of staff. O'Hare, account breach. Need IT audit. Now, before she could hit send, the booth screen glitched, her tablet buzzing violently. A new alert flashed, not from Apex but from the airline system, somehow hijacking her connection. Amara Kendall, no-fly risk, profile suspended. Her blood ran cold, the words searing into her mind. No-fly risk, suspended. She clicked, out, but the alert spread. Her tablet now locked to a single page. Her airline profile, once pristine, now a digital scarlet letter. Her name was gone from the Zurich flight's manifest, erased as if she'd never booked it. The burner phone buzzed, its screen mirroring the alert, confirming the hack's reach. Amara's hands trembled, but she gripped the phone tighter. Her mind racing. This wasn't just a lounge denial or a seat downgrade. This was her entire presence, her ability to fight, being wiped clean. The executive in the next booth typed on, his screen free of warnings, his world untouched by the unseen hand that crushed hers. She leaned back, her breath shallow, and scanned the terminal again. A security camera swiveled above, its lens glinting like an eye. Victor Hensley's influence was everywhere. Radio crackles, guarded glances, now this digital guillotine. He'd moved beyond physical barriers, striking at her core, her ability to operate as CEO. She pictured him somewhere in the airport's nerve center, smirking as he typed commands, believing he'd cornered her. But Amara wasn't cornered. She was kindled. She powered off the burner phone, severing the hacked connection, and pulled out a stylus, scribbling notes on a scrap of paper from her coat. Every lockout, every flag, she'd record it, build a case, turn their weapons against them. The booth's screen flickered again. The airline's alert fading, but the damage was done. Her tablet was useless, her profile a ghost, but her mind was alive, mapping the battlefield. She needed an IT kiosk, a human to override the system, to force Hensley's hand into the open. She stood, tucking the burner phone away, and stepped. Back into the terminal's flow, her heels a steady drum against the chaos. The Wi-Fi zone had been a trap, but it had shown her the enemy's reach and her own resilience. She'd lost her digital access, but not her fight. The deal, her team, her legacy, they were still hers to save, and she'd claw them back, one calculated step at a time. If Amara's battle against this digital erasure fires you up, drop a 1 in the comments to show you're with her. Smash that like button and subscribe to see her next move. Ever had your voice silenced when it mattered most? Comment too if you think she'll outsmart this trap, and tell us how you'd fight back in her place. When everything's stripped away, what keeps you pushing forward? Tap 3 if you're betting on her to flip this game, and stick around. Will the IT kiosk be her comeback or another dead end? Amara Kendall moved through Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2 with the precision of a hunted animal. Her every step measured, her senses sharp, despite the weight of her unraveling world. The digital lockout in the Wi-Fi zone still burned. Her Apex Vanguard account sealed shut, her airline profile branded no-fly risk, her name erased from the Zurich flight's manifest. The torn deal documents in her coat pocket crackled faintly, a fragile reminder of the $600 million acquisition slipping through her fingers. Her first-class seat, her briefcase, her lounge access, her digital presence, all stripped away by an unseen hand she knew was Victor Hensley's. The terminal pulsed around her, travelers chatting, screens flashing, gate updates, the scent of pretzels drifting from a kiosk. But to Amara it was a gauntlet, each corner hiding a new trap. She needed to fight back, to force the airline system to see her, and the IT kiosk ahead, tucked near a crowded gate, was her next battlefield. The kiosk was a sleek pod of glass and chrome, its sign promising technical support for all travelers. A lone technician sat inside, his navy uniform crisp, his eyes glued to a monitor. Amara's heels clicked as she approached, her torn coat sleeve a silent badge of her battles. The plain escort, The bag search, the lounge ban, the digital blackout. She carried no tablet now, its screen corrupted by Hensley's hack, but her burner phone tucked in her pocket held a faint pulse of hope. She'd recorded the lockout alerts, scribbled notes of every slight, building a case she'd wield when the moment came. The technician looked up as she reached the counter, his name tag reading D. Patel, his expression neutral but wary, as if her presence alone signaled trouble. "I need my airline profile reinstated," Amara said, her voice steady, honed to cut through resistance. "Amara Kendall, Zurich flight, 8:30. The system flagged me as a no-fly risk. It's an error." Patel's eyes flicked to his screen, then back to her, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "ID and boarding pass," he said, his tone clipped, already typing before she could respond. She slid her Apex Vanguard ID across the counter, its silver embossing glinting under the kiosk's harsh light, and the crumpled economy pass. Row 35, seat C, a bitter afterthought. Patel scanned both, his fingers pausing as the screen loaded, its glow reflecting the weight of her erased identity. The terminal hummed behind her. Gate calls, a businessman's loud phone call, the shuffle of a boarding line forming nearby. Amara's pulse quickened, the memory of Hensley's voice crackling through radios haunting her. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting guards, but saw only travelers, their indifference a wall she couldn't breach. Patel frowned at the screen, his brow creasing. "Your profile's locked," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Says here, identity theft concern." Amara's stomach lurched, the accusation a fresh cut, sharper than the lounge's. "Denial." "Identity theft," she repeated, her tone ice-cold, daring him to repeat it. "I'm standing here with verified ID, that's my name, my account. Check the logs." Patel hesitated, his fingers hovering, but her stare pressed him forward. He typed rapidly, pulling up her booking history, first-class ticket, paid in full, no prior flags. "Looks like a system glitch," he muttered, almost to himself, and Amara's chest eased, a sliver of triumph breaking through. "Override it," she said, leaning closer. "Restore my profile, my seat, everything." Patel nodded, his hands moving to key in a code, and for a moment she believed she'd clawed back a piece of her power. The screen blinked green, her name flickering back onto the manifest, and she exhaled, imagining her team in Zurich, waiting for her signal to seal the deal. But before Patel could save the changes, his headset buzzed, a sharp crackle slicing through the kiosk's hum. A voice, Hensley's, smooth and venomous, spilled out. "Patel, flag Kendall, suspicious activity. Hold her there." Amara's blood froze, her victory unraveling in an instant. Patel's face tightened, his fingers stalling, and he glanced at her with a mix of guilt and fear. "I have to report this," he whispered, already typing a new command. The screen flashed red again, her profile vanishing, replaced by a bold alert. "Security concern. Detain for verification." Amara's hands clenched, her nails biting into her palms. "You saw my record," she said, her voice low, urgent. "You know this is wrong. Don't do this." Before Patel could respond, the kiosk's glass doors slid open, and two security guards stepped in, their boots heavy, their badges glinting under the lights. The taller one, R. Vance, spoke first, his voice loud enough to carry beyond the pod. "Ms. Kendall, step back. You're under suspicion for identity theft." Amara's heart pounded, but she held her ground, her eyes darting to the growing crowd outside. Travelers pausing, phones rising, their whispers a rising tide. "This is my identity," she said, pointing to her ID still on the counter. "You're targeting me without cause." Vance ignored her, gesturing to his partner, a wiry man with a buzz cut who grabbed her ID and pass, tossing them into a plastic bin like evidence. The crowd thickened, a businessman in a navy blazer murmuring too. His wife, a college student filming with a shaky hand, their stares a spotlight on Amara's shame. She felt the weight of their assumptions. Black woman, troublemaker, fraud etched in every glance. Vance raised his voice, performative now. "We've got reports of stolen credentials tied to this profile. Stay calm, and we'll sort it." Amara's rage flared, but she banked it. her mind racing. She pulled her burner phone, discreetly hitting record, capturing Vance's words, Patel's silence, the crowd's hum. "You're lying," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the noise. "Show me the report, show me proof." Vance's eyes narrowed, but Patel shifted, his guilt cracking. "I saw her booking," he muttered, barely audible. "It was clean." Amara seized the opening, leaning toward him. "Then fix it. Now." Patel's hands twitched, but before he could act, a new sound cut through, a ping from a dozen phones. In the crowd, then dozens more. Amara glanced at her burner, its screen lighting up with a social media alert, a post spreading like wildfire. "Woman at O'Hare caught using fake ID, disrupting flight." The image was grainy, pulled from a security feed, but it was her, standing at the customer service desk, her face twisted in anger, captioned as a fraud. Comments poured in, vicious, racial, tearing her apart. Her throat tightened. The world, tilting as the crowd's whispers turned to murmurs, then shouts. "That's her," a man called, pointing. "Get her out." Amara's hand shook, but she kept recording, her only shield against the lie. The post was no accident. Hensley's work, a digital dagger to her reputation. Worse than the no-fly flag designed to ruin her globally. She faced Vance, her voice low, lethal. "You planned this, you leaked that." He smirked, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, and gestured to his partner. "Take her to holding. We'll verify there." Amara stepped back, her heels scraping. The floor calculating, fight, and they'd cuff her, run, and they'd chase. She chose defiance, holding up her phone, still recording. "This is live," she lied, praying it landed. "Every word, every move, you're exposed." Vance hesitated, his smirk faltering, and Patel looked away, his hands retreating to his lap. The crowd pressed closer, phones flashing, their judgment a noose, but Amara stood tall, her posture unbroken. She'd lost her profile, her seat, her dignity, but not her will. She'd make them pay, not with screams, but with proof, with precision. As the guards moved to flank her, she slipped the phone into her pocket, her mind already mapping the next step. The kiosk was a trap, but it had shown her Hensley's desperation. He'd gone public, risked exposure to crush her. She needed a press desk, a way to counter this smear, to turn the spotlight back on them. The terminal stretched before her, a maze of glass and lies, but she walked forward, her heels a steady drum, ready to carve her path through the chaos. Amara Kendall carved a path through the crowded heart of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her pulse hammering in her ears, the sting of the IT kiosk's betrayal still raw. The viral social media post, her face plastered across screens, branded. A fraud had turned the terminal into a cage of whispers and pointed fingers. Her first-class seat, her briefcase, her lounge access, her digital accounts, her reputation, all stripped away by Victor Hensley's unseen hand, each blow harder than the last. The torn deal documents in her coat pocket felt like relics now, their $600 million promise fading under the weight of lies. Yet Amara walked on, her heels striking the tiles with defiance, her mind a steel trap plotting her next move. She needed to counter the smear, to reclaim her voice. And the airport's media desk, a small outpost near Gate C9, beckoned like a battlefield where she could strike back. The desk was a modest counter, tucked between a newsstand and a smoothie kiosk, its surface cluttered with press badges and a flickering monitor. A lone staffer, a woman in her 30s with a tight bun and a name tag reading L. Harper, typed furiously, her eyes darting between screens. The terminal buzzed around them, boarding calls crackling, suitcases rattling, a toddler's wail slicing through the din. But Amara's focus locked on Harper, her last hope to shift the narrative. She smoothed her coat, the torn sleeve a quiet badge of her fight, and stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. "I need to issue a statement," she said, each word deliberate, cutting through the terminal's hum. "Amara Kendall, Apex Vanguard. I've been falsely accused of fraud on social media. Your airline's responsible." Harper looked up, her fingers pausing mid-keystroke, her expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Accused?" she asked, her voice low, as if testing the waters. Amara nodded, pulling out her burner phone, its cracked screen glowing with the damning post, her image, the caption screaming fake ID, the comments a sewer of racial venom. "This was leaked from your system," she said, sliding the phone forward. "I'm a paying passenger, a CEO, and I'm being targeted. I want it retracted now." Harper's eyes flicked to the screen, then to Amara, a flicker of unease crossing her face. She hesitated, then typed, pulling up the airline's internal feed. "Let me check," she muttered, her fingers moving with reluctant speed. Amara's chest tightened, the memory of every lost battle flashing, Larson's torn pages, Reynolds' seat downgrade, Carter's lounge denial, Patel's digital lockout. She braced for another trap, her eyes scanning the terminal. Travelers flowed past, their indifference a wall, but a few lingered, their phones angled, capturing her like vultures circling a wound. She spotted a white woman in a trench coat, her press badge glinting, typing notes nearby, unbothered by the desk's tension. The contrast burned, her freedom, Amara's cage. Harper's screen blinked, pulling Amara's focus back, and a spark of hope flickered as the staffer frowned. "Your profile's flagged," Harper said, her voice softening. "But I see your booking, first-class clean record. This, doesn't add up." Amara leaned closer, seizing the crack in the system's armor. "Then issue the statement," she said, her tone urgent but controlled. "Say the post is false, that I'm a verified passenger. Do it now." Harper nodded, her hands moving to draft a note, and Amara's heart lifted. She was close, so close to turning the tide. She pictured the Zurich team, waiting for her. Signal, the deal still alive if she could clear her name. But before Harper could save the draft, her headset crackled, a sharp voice cutting through, Hensley's, cold and commanding. "Harper, stop. Kendall's under investigation. Trespassing." "Hold her there." Amara's blood froze, the victory slipping away like sand. Harper's face paled, her fingers stalling, and she glanced at Amara with a mix of fear and apology. "I'm sorry," she whispered, already typing a new command. Before Amara could protest, the desk's glass partition slid open, and two security guards stormed in, their boots thundering against the floor. The taller one, badge reading M. Cruz, spoke first, his voice booming to draw eyes. "Ms. Kendall, you're trespassing on restricted property. Come with us." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs, but she held her ground, her eyes darting to the crowd now gathering, phones flashing, whispers rising, the trench-coated woman typing faster. "Trespassing?" she snapped, her voice slicing through the noise. "I'm a ticketed passenger. This is public space." Cruz ignored her, stepping closer, his hand flashing a pair of cuffs that glinted under the lights. His partner, a stocky man with a shaved head, grabbed her arm, his grip loose but deliberate, and pulled her toward the counter's edge. Frach, cuffs clicked open, the sound a gunshot in Amara's ears, and the crowd gasped, their phones a sea of lenses capturing her shame. She twisted, her coat tearing further, and faced Harper. "You saw my record," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Don't let them do this." Harper looked away, her hands retreating, and Amara felt the sting of another betrayal, not personal but systemic, another pawn in Hensley's game. Cruz raised the cuffs, his voice louder now, performative. "Don't resist, ma'am. We're taking you to holding." The word holding landed like a blade, and Amara's mind raced. Cuffs meant detention, meant losing the deal, meant her fight ending in a cell. She cited her rights, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You need probable cause," she said, stepping back, her heels scraping. "Show me the report. Show me anything." Cruz's eyes narrowed, but a radio crackle interrupted. Another, voice higher-pitched, a supervisor. "Verify her status first," it said, and Cruz hesitated, the cuffs lowering slightly. Amara seized the pause, pulling her burner phone, showing her booking email, her ID photo, her Apex Vanguard title glowing on the cracked screen. The crowd murmured, a few travelers shifting, their whispers softening, and Harper glanced at the phone, her guilt cracking. "She's right," Harper muttered, barely audible. "Her ticket's valid." Cruz's partner released her arm and the cuffs snapped shut, unfastened, a fleeting triumph. Amara exhaled, her shoulders easing, believing she'd dodged the worst. But then Cruz's radio buzzed again, Hensley's voice colder, sharper. Kendall's linked to a stolen laptop from the Apex Lounge. Witnesses confirm. Detain her. Amara's stomach dropped. The accusation a sledgehammer, worse than the trespassing lie, threatening not just shame but jail. The crowd gasped louder, phones flashing brighter, and Cruz's smirk returned, his hand grabbing her arm again, tighter. Now. Laptop theft, he said, loud enough for the terminal to hear. You're coming with us. Amara's rage flared, but she banked it, her mind scrambling. A laptop? She hadn't been near the lounge since Carter's betrayal, but Hensley's. Reach was clear. He'd planted evidence, spun a new lie to bury her deeper. The trench-coated woman typed furiously, her badge catching the light, and Amara realized the story was growing, her name now tied to crime, not just fraud. She faced Cruz, her voice lethal. You're framing me. You know it. Cruz's grip tightened, but the supervisor's voice crackled again, ordering a pause to check witnesses. The guards stepped back, their hands hovering, and Amara pulled free, her arm throbbing where Cruz's fingers had dug in. She memorized his badge number, her eyes burning into his, promising a reckoning. The crowd dispersed slightly, their interest waning, but the damage was done. Her name was mud, her fight public, her deal teetering. She needed her briefcase, the real evidence, to disprove this lie. Baggage claim was her only shot, a long shot, but she'd take it. She turned, her heels steady, and walked toward the escalators, Hensley's shadow looming larger, her resolve afire against the cold. If Amara's stand against this false arrest lights a spark in you, drop a 1 in the comments to back her. Fight? Hit that like button and subscribe to see her next strike. Ever faced a lie that turned everyone against you? Comment too if you think she'll unravel this setup, and share how you'd push through her storm. When the world brands you guilty, what's your anchor? Tap 3 if you're rooting for her to burn this trap down, and stay tuned. Will baggage claim be her lifeline or another ambush? Amara Kendall descended the escalator into the underbelly of Chicago O'Hare's baggage claim, her torn coat sleeve catching the chilly draft that swirled through the cavernous hall. The false arrest threat at the media desk still throbbed. In her mind, cuffs glinting, the guard's grip bruising her arm, the crowd's phones flashing as Victor Hensley's latest lie branded her a laptop thief. Her first-class seat, her briefcase, her lounge access, her digital accounts, her reputation, all had been stripped away, each blow sharper, deeper, designed to bury her. The crumpled deal documents in her coat pocket, remnants of her $600 million Zurich acquisition, felt like ghosts now, their promise fading under Hensley's relentless assault. Yet Amara pressed on, her heels clicking against the scuffed tiles, her eyes fixed on the baggage claim counter ahead. Her briefcase, lost to cargo since the security office, was her last hope. Its contents could disprove the theft charge, clear her name, and save her deal. She refused to let it slip away. The baggage claim area was a maze of conveyor belts and flickering signs, the air thick with the hum of machinery and the faint stench of spilled coffee. Travelers milled about, some slumped on benches, others wrestling oversized suitcases, their lives a world apart from Amara's fight. The counter loomed at the far end, manned by a clerk in a faded navy vest, his name tag reading T. Nguyen. His face was weary, etched with the boredom of endless shifts, but his eyes sharpened as Amara approached, her posture unbroken despite the battles etched into her torn coat and tense jaw. She set her crumpled economy boarding pass, row 35, seat C on the counter, its ink smudged but legible. "I'm Amara Kendall," she said, her voice steady, honed to pierce the haze of indifference. "My briefcase was sent to cargo without consent. Black leather, Apex Vanguard tag. I need it now." Joshin glanced at the pass, then at her, his expression guarded, as if her request carried hidden weight. "Ticket number?" he asked, already turning to his monitor, his fingers poised over the keyboard. Amara recited the confirmation from memory, her burner phone too risky to pull out after the kiosk's hack. The terminal's noise pressed in, belts grinding, a lost bag alarm blaring, a couple arguing nearby, but Amara's focus stayed locked on Nguyen, watching for the telltale flicker of Hensley's influence. She'd heard his voice too many times, crackling through radios, headsets, now a phantom in every pause. Nguyen typed, his screen flashing, and Amara's pulse quickened, hope battling dread. Her briefcase held contracts, a USB drive, proof of her deal. Her lifeline against the lies piling up. The clerk frowned, leaning closer to the monitor, his brow creasing. "It's here," he said finally, his voice low, almost surprised. "Cargo Bay 3 tagged for your flight. I'll have it pulled." Amara exhaled, a flicker of triumph breaking through the fog of defeat. She pictured the briefcase, sleek, heavy, its contents untouched, ready to bury Hensley's theft charge. "Hurry," she said, her tone urgent but controlled. Julian nodded, radioing a handler, and Amara leaned against the counter, her torn documents crinkling in her pocket. She glanced around, spotting a white passenger nearby, his designer suitcase pristine, retrieved without question, his ease a silent contrast to her ordeal. The sight stung, a reminder of the rules that bent for others and broke for her. A handler emerged from a side door, wheeling a cart stacked with bags. Amara's heart leapt as she spotted her briefcase, black leather, Apex Vanguard tag glinting, under the fluorescent lights. But as the handler drew closer, her stomach twisted. The bag was soaked, water pooling beneath it, the leather streaked with grime. The front zipper gaped open, papers spilling like wounded birds. She lunged forward, her heels scraping, and grabbed it, her fingers trembling as she unzipped the main compartment. Inside, chaos. Contracts shredded, ink bleeding, her tablet cracked, its screen dark. The USB drive, her last hope, dangled from a broken clasp, its casing dented. Amara's breath hitched, her knees buckling, but she steadied herself, her nails digging into the leather. Nguyen stepped back, his eyes wide, as if the bag's state was a crime he hadn't signed up for. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice low, lethal, holding up a sodden contract, its signatures dissolved into blue smears. Nguyen stammered, "Cargo. Sometimes gets rough. Water damage, maybe." Amara's gaze burned into him. "This wasn't an accident," she said, each word a blade. "This was deliberate." She rifled through the wreckage, salvaging the USB drive, its metal cold against her palm. It was battered but intact, a faint pulse of hope. She needed a computer, a way to check it, to see if her deal's data survived. She turned to Nguyen, pointing to a dusty terminal behind the counter. "Let me use that, now." Nguyen hesitated, his radio crackling faintly, but her stare pushed him to comply. He unlocked the terminal, its screen flickering to life, and Amara plugged in the USB, her hands steady despite the storm inside. The drive whirred, a loading bar crawling, and she held her breath, picturing her files, spreadsheets, emails, the Zurich deal's blueprint. The screen blinked, and her heart soared as a folder appeared, labeled Apex Acquisition. She clicked, ready to reclaim her fight, but the folder opened to a nightmare, files she'd never seen labeled fraud evidence, embezzlement logs, stolen asset records. Her name was everywhere, tied to fake transactions, forged signatures, crimes she'd never touched. Amara's stomach dropped, the air thinning as if the terminal had sealed shut. The USB wasn't hers, it was a plant, Hensley's cruelest strike yet, turning her lifeline into a trap. She yanked the drive out, her hands shaking, and faced Nguyen, who'd backed away, his eyes darting to the handler. "This isn't mine," she said, her voice cracking but firm. "Someone tampered with it." Nguyen shook his head, his radio buzzing louder now, Hensley's shadow creeping closer. "I just pull bags," he muttered, retreating behind the counter. Amara glanced at the white passenger again, his suitcase now loaded onto a cart, untouched, his world free of sabotage. The contrast screamed, her evidence destroyed, his preserved, her race the dividing line. She clutched the USB, its dented casing a weight in her hand, and scanned the hall. Travelers stared, some whispering, their judgment a familiar noose. But Amara refused to buckle. Her briefcase was ruined, her data corrupted, her deal hanging by a thread, but her mind was alive, piecing together Hensley's game. He'd gone beyond lies, trespassing, theft, now fraud, risking exposure to bury her. She needed a new plan, a voice outside the airport's grip. Her burner phone, low on battery, was her only link. She needed a lawyer, someone to pierce this web before it choked her. She turned, her heels steady, and headed for a public phone. Booth Hensley's reach a shadow she'd outrun, one step at a time. Amara Kendall slipped into a dimly lit cafe, tucked in a forgotten corner of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her torn coat blending into the shadows as she dodged the terminal's watchful eyes. The baggage claim's devastation still seared her mind, her briefcase soaked, contracts shredded, the USB drive a trap of planted fraud files, Victor Hensley's cruelest blow yet. Her first-class seat, lounge access, digital accounts, reputation, and now her physical evidence, all erased, each strike more vicious, designed to crush her $600 million Zurich deal and her as its architect. The cafe's hum, clinking. Mugs, a barista's chatter, the faint strum of jazz, offered a fragile shield from the terminal's chaos, but Amara's pulse raced, her burner phone's low battery a ticking clock. She needed a lifeline, someone beyond Hensley's reach, and her lawyer friend Maya Ellison was her last hope to unravel this web before it choked her. The cafe's booths were scuffed wood, their cushions worn, but Amara chose one facing the exit, her back to the wall, her eyes scanning every passerby. Her torn deal documents stuffed in her coat crackled faintly, their inked promises bleeding into memory. She powered on the burner phone, its cracked screen flickering, and dialed Maya's secure line, each ring a pulse in the quiet. The call connected, Maya's voice sharp, steady. "Amara, where are you?" Amara exhaled, the sound of an ally grounding her. "O'Hare," she said, her voice low, urgent. "They've locked me out, accounts, profile, everything. Planted evidence, fraud files. I need you to pull Apex's records, prove I'm clean." Maya's pause was brief, professional. "Got it, I'll dig. But there's chatter at Apex, the board's spooked." Amara's stomach twisted, a new dread clawing at her. "Spooked?" she repeated, her tone edging toward steel. "About what?" Maya hesitated, her voice dropping. "Your behavior. The social media post, the airport incidents, they're calling it controversial. Some want distance." Amara's hand tightened around the phone, her nails biting into her palm. Apex Vanguard, her empire, built through sleepless nights and hostile rooms, was turning on her. She pictured her board, mostly white older men, their trust in her always conditional, now fraying under lies she hadn't spun. "That's Hensley," she said, her voice a controlled burn. "He's poisoning them. Get me proof of my accounts, Maya. I'll handle the board." Maya agreed, promising to call back, and Amara hung up, her breath shallow, the cafe's warmth suddenly stifling. She glanced around, spotting a white colleague from Apex, Evan Carter, a junior VP in a nearby booth, his laptop open, his suit pristine. He typed effortlessly, his access to Apex's servers untouched, his presence a stark contrast to her exile. Evan had closed deals half her size, faced no whispers, no flags, yet here he sat, free, while she fought for scraps. The injustice burned, her race the unspoken line between his ease and her erasure. She wanted to confront him, demand why he hadn't noticed her absence, but she banked the urge, her mind sharpening. She needed an ally, not a scene. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Reese, a board member she'd mentored, one of the few who'd backed her rise. "Heard about O'Hare. I'm with you, calling an emergency meeting to clear your name." Amara's chest eased, a spark of hope igniting. Daniel's influence could sway the board, remind them of her record, billions in profits, global expansions, her vision unchallenged until today. She typed back, "Push hard. I'm clean. Zurich's still alive." She hit send, imagining the boardroom, Daniel's voice cutting through the doubt, her deal's pulse steadying. For a moment, she believed she'd turned a corner, that Apex would rally, that Hensley's lies would crack under scrutiny. But before she could savor the win, her phone buzzed again, this time with an email forwarded by Maya marked "Urgent Apex Board." Amara's heart sank as she opened it, a leaked thread from the board's private server, doctored emails, bearing her signature, claiming she'd siphoned funds from the Zurich deal. The figures were absurd, millions diverted to offshore accounts, none real, but the timestamps, the formatting were flawless fakes. A board vote was scheduled in 30 minutes to suspend her as CEO, citing financial misconduct. Amara's vision blurred, the cafe tilting as if the ground had shifted. Suspension? Her empire, her legacy, gutted by lies she couldn't outrun. Evan glanced up, oblivious, his screen glowing with Apex's logo, untouched by the storm consuming her. She stood, her chair scraping, and paced the booth, her mind racing. Hensley hadn't just targeted her at O'Hare. He'd infiltrated Apex, weaponized her own board against her. She pictured him, smug, pulling strings from some airport control, a room believing he'd won. But Amara didn't fold. She dialed Daniel, her voice steady despite the fire inside. "The emails are fake," she said, the second he answered. "Check the metadata. Hensley's behind this." Daniel's tone was grim but resolute. "I'll fight for you, but they're rattled. The vote's tight." Amara hung up, her throat tight, the cafe's jazz now a mocking hum. Her deal, her title, her life's work teetered, and she was trapped in this terminal fighting shadows. She glanced at Evan again, his fingers flying, his world intact while hers burned. The disparity screamed, his whiteness a shield, her blackness a target. She wanted to scream, to shatter the cafe's calm, but she channeled the rage, her mind mapping the next step. She needed to send evidence to regulators, to expose Hensley's web before the vote sealed her fate. A secure fax station near the terminal's business center was her only shot, a narrow path through the chaos. She slipped out of the cafe, her heels steady, her torn coat a badge of her fight. Hensley's shadow loomed, but Amara walked on, her resolve a blade ready to cut through the lies. If Amara's battle against this corporate betrayal hits home, drop a 1 in the comments to stand by her side, smash that like button, and subscribe to catch her next move. Ever had your own team turn their backs when you needed them most? Comment too if you think she'll outmaneuver this boardroom ambush, and share how you'd fight for your name. When loyalty crumbles, what's your next play? Tap 3 if you're betting she'll tear this setup apart and stay locked in. Will the fax station be her counterstrike or another snare? Amara Kendall navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her torn coat flapping as she moved with grim determination toward the business center's secure fax station. The corporate betrayal in the cafe still burned, her Apex Vanguard board, swayed by Victor Hensley's doctored emails, poised to suspend her as CEO, threatening her $600 million Zurich deal and her life's work. Her first-class seat, briefcase, lounge access, digital, accounts, reputation and evidence had been stripped away, each blow more brutal, designed to erase her. The crumpled deal documents in her pocket, their ink fading, were all that remained of her fight. But her burner phone, battery at 5%, held a whistleblower report she'd drafted, a last-ditch effort to expose Hensley to federal regulators. The terminal hummed around her, gate calls crackling, suitcases rolling, a janitor's mop slapping wet tiles, but Amara felt hunted, every shadow a potential trap, her heels a defiant rhythm against the chaos. The business center was a glass-walled enclave near Gate B12, its sign promising secure fax and print for travelers. Inside, a single fax machine blinked under fluorescent lights, its hum a faint promise of salvation. Amara's pulse raced as she entered, her torn sleeve catching on the doorframe, a silent reminder of her battles: plane escort, bag search, digital lockout, false arrest, now board betrayal. She carried no ID now, just her phone and documents, but her resolve was iron, forged in the fire of Hensley's relentless assault. The clerk, a young man with a name tag reading C. Lopez, glanced up from a crossword, his eyes narrowing as if her presence alone signaled trouble. "Fax service?" he asked, his tone flat, already reaching for a form. "Yes," Amara said, her voice steady, cutting through the room's stale air. "Urgent. Regulatory filing, no questions." She slid her burner phone across the counter, the whistleblower report open, a detailed account of O'Hare's abuses. Hensley's name bolded, tied to fraud, profiling, and sabotage. Lopez hesitated, his fingers hovering, but nodded, powering up the facts. Amara's chest tightened, hope flickering. If the report reached the regulators, she could halt the board's vote, save her deal, her name. She fed the document's code into the machine, its dial tone buzzing, and watched the numbers connect, each beep a pulse of defiance. The terminal's noise faded. Boarding calls, a vending machine's clunk, a white businessman's loud laugh nearby. Her focus locked on the fax's progress bar, creeping toward completion. But before the transmission finished, the glass door slammed open, and 3 security guards stormed in, their boots thundering, their faces hard under the lights. They weren't airport staff, plainclothes, badges unmarked, their bulk suggesting hired muscle, Hensley's private escalation. The leader, a towering man with a jagged scar across his cheek, fixed his eyes on Amara. "Kendall," he growled, his voice loud enough to rattle the glass. "Retract that report or you're done." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs, but she held her ground, her fingers tightening around the phone. "Done?" she snapped, her tone ice-cold. "You're threatening a federal filing. Step back." The second guard, wiry with a buzz cut, shoved her shoulder, his push hard enough to bruise, sending her stumbling against the counter. Pain flared in her arm, but Amara straightened, her eyes burning into the leader's. The third guard, stocky with a coiled stance, blocked the door, his hand on a radio muttering code words she couldn't catch. Lopez froze, his crossword forgotten, his eyes darting between Amara and the guards, fear rooting him in place. Outside, the terminal flowed on. A white businessman in a suit strolled past, his briefcase swinging, glancing at the commotion but walking on, his indifference a knife in Amara's gut. Her race, her fight, invisible to him, while she faced violence he'd never know. The leader stepped closer, his breath hot, his voice low, menacing. "Last chance, kill the fax, or we make this physical." Amara's mind raced, every instinct screaming to run, but the fax machine hummed, inches from completion. She'd lost too much, her seat, her evidence, her board, to fold now. She hit record on her burner phone, tucking it into her pocket, its lens angled to catch their faces. "You're on camera," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Every word, every move, touch me again and it's over for you." The leader's eyes narrowed, but he hesitated, his scar twitching as if her defiance cracked his script. Lopez stammered, "I don't want trouble." But Amara ignored him, her focus locked on the fax, its bar at 90%, so close to freedom. The buzz-cut guard lunged, snatching her phone from her pocket, his grip crushing her wrist. He slammed it against the counter, the screen shattering, the recording cut dead. "No cameras," he snarled, tossing the wreckage into a trash bin. Amara's stomach dropped, her last shield gone, but she faced the leader, her posture unbroken. "You think that stops me?" she said, her voice a blade. "The report's sent. You're too late." The fax machine beeped, transmission complete, and a spark of triumph flared in her chest. She'd done it, pierced Hensley's web, alerted the regulators. But the leader's smirk returned, chilling her. "Sent," he said, stepping closer. "Check again." He nodded to the stocky guard, who ripped the fax's confirmation sheet from the machine, tearing it in half. Amara lunged, but the buzz cut. Guard grabbed her arm again, twisting until she gasped, pain shooting through her shoulder. The leader leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "We own this place. That fax diverted, and now you've attacked us." Amara's vision blurred, the lie a sledgehammer, worse than the board's betrayal, turning her victory into a trap. The regulators wouldn't see her report. Hensley had hijacked it, and now she'd be framed for assault, her fight buried under new lies. Lopez backed away, his hands raised, as if the scene was a fire he couldn't touch. The white businessman outside slowed, peering through the glass, but turned away, his steps quickening, leaving Amara to drown. The guards' radios crackled, Hensley's voice faint but unmistakable, ordering them to secure her. She wrenched free, her arm throbbing, and faced the leader, her voice lethal. "You're not security, you're hired thugs, and I'm not done." The leader's smirk faltered, her defiance a crack in his armor, but he gestured to the others, their hands hovering, ready to drag her away. Amara's mind scrambled, calculating. Fight, and they'd overpower her. Scream, and the terminal would brand her erratic. She needed medical aid, a witness, someone to see the bruise blooming on her arm, to document this violence before it vanished into Hensley's lies. The airport clinic was nearby, a faint hope, but hope all the same. She backed toward the door, her heels scraping, her eyes locked on the leaders. "You'll regret this," she said, each word a promise, a fire she'd carry. The guards parted, their confidence shaken, and she slipped out, the terminals, chaos swallowing her, her resolve a shield against the coming storm. Amara Kendall limped through the fluorescent-lit corridors of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her torn coat barely concealing the bruise blooming on her arm, a throbbing reminder of the fax station's violence. The hired guards' shove, their smashed destruction of her burner phone, and the diverted whistleblower report still seared her mind. Victor Hensley's latest trap, framing her for assault while her $600 million Zurich deal hung by a thread. Her first-class seat, briefcase, lounge access, digital accounts, reputation, evidence, and board trust had been stripped away, each blow more vicious, designed to annihilate her. The crumpled deal documents in her pocket, their ink a fading. Ghost were all she carried now, her body a map of battles, plane escort, bag search, digital lockout, false arrest, corporate betrayal. Yet Amara pressed on, her heels uneven but defiant, aiming for the airport clinic near Gate D4, a desperate bid to document her injury before Hensley's lies buried her deeper. The clinic was a sterile box of white walls and antiseptic air, its waiting area sparse, plastic chairs, a muted TV, a vending machine humming in the corner, a nurse behind a glass partition, her name tag reading E. Morgan, typed with mechanical focus, her eyes flicking up as Amara approached. The bruise pulsed under her sleeve, a deep ache that matched the fire in her chest. She leaned against the counter, her voice steady despite the pain. "I need treatment," she said, each word deliberate, cutting through the clinic's hum. "Bruised arm, possible sprain, and I need it documented. Now." Morgan's gaze lingered on Amara's torn coat, her expression shifting from neutrality to suspicion, as if injury itself was a crime. "ID and insurance," Morgan said, her tone clipped, already reaching for a clipboard. Amara's stomach twisted. She had no ID left, stolen or lost in the terminal's gauntlet, only her name and her truth. "Amara Kendall," she said, sliding her crumpled boarding pass, row 35, seat C, across the counter. "I'm a passenger. This is urgent." Morgan glanced at the pass, her lips pursing, and typed, her screen's glow reflecting a flicker of doubt. The clinic's door opened, and a white patient, a man in a polo shirt, clutching his wrist, entered, his presence a quiet contrast. Morgan waved him to a chair without question, her focus still on Amara, but her demeanor hardened as if Amara's urgency was a disruption. The nurse frowned at her monitor, her fingers pausing. "Your profile's flagged," she said, her voice low, accusing. "Behavioral concern. I need to verify." Amara's heart sank, Hensley's shadow creeping closer, his lies now poisoning even medical care. "Behavioral?" she repeated, her tone ice-cold, daring Morgan to explain. "I'm here for a bruise. Check my record." Morgan hesitated, her eyes darting to the white patient, who sat calmly, his wrist already being examined by a second nurse who'd appeared from a back room. His ease, his unquestioned care burned, another rule bent for him, broken for her. Amara leaned closer, her voice urgent. "I was attacked. Document it or you're complicit." Morgan's hands twitched, and she typed again, pulling up a sparse file. Amara's name, her flight, nothing more, no flags she could see. "All right," she muttered, gesturing to an exam room. "Follow me." Amara exhaled, a flicker of hope breaking through the fog of dread. She trailed Morgan into the room, its walls bare, a single bed creaking under a paper sheet. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the bruise, purple, sprawling, a map of the guard's shove. Morgan's eyes widened, but her expression stayed guarded, as if truth was a liability. "That's significant," she said, reaching for a chart. "I'll note it. Sit tight." Amara sat, her arm throbbing, her mind racing. Documentation meant evidence. A crack in Hensley's armor. a chance to prove the violence and reclaim her fight. She pictured her Zurich team, waiting for her signal, the deal still alive, if she could survive this gauntlet. Morgan scribbled, her pen scratching, and Amara allowed herself a moment's relief, believing she'd secured a foothold. But then Morgan's headset crackled, a low voice spilling out, Hensley's sharp, unmistakable, Kendall's unstable, sedate her, hold for psych eval. Amara's blood froze, the victory crumbling like ash. Morgan's face tightened, her pen stalling, and she glanced at Amara with a mix of fear and compliance. The nurse stepped to a cabinet, pulling a syringe, its needle glinting under the lights. "You're showing signs of distress," she said, her voice robotic, rehearsed. "This'll calm you down." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs, her body recoiling. "Distress?" she snapped, standing, her heels scraping the floor. "I'm bruised, not delusional. Put that away." Morgan hesitated, the syringe trembling in her hand, but her headset buzzed again. Hensley's voice, colder, urging compliance. Outside, the white patient laughed with the second nurse, his wrist bandaged, his care swift, unquestioned, while Amara faced a needle meant to silence her. The disparity screamed, her race a target, his a pass. Amara backed toward the door, her arm pulsing, her mind scrambling. Sedation meant losing control, her deal, her voice, her freedom. Hensley's cruelest trap yet, worse than the guard's shove, designed to lock her away as unstable. She cited her rights, her voice steady despite the panic clawing her chest. "You need consent," she said, her eyes burning into Morgan's. "Touch me and I'll sue." Morgan froze, the syringe lowering, her guilt cracking through the script. But the second nurse appeared, her badge reading P. Klein, her stance blocking the exit. "She's right," Morgan muttered, stepping back, but Klein shook her head, reaching for Amara's arm. Amara dodged, her coat tearing further, and bolted for the door, her heels skidding on the tiles. Klein lunged, but Amara was faster, bursting into the waiting area, the white patient staring, his bandage gleaming, his world untouched by the chaos swallowing her. She hit the terminal's corridor, her breath ragged, the clinic's antiseptic stink clinging to her. Sirens wailed faintly, and she glanced back. Two police officers, tipped by Hensley, stormed toward the clinic, their radios crackling with her name. Mental health risk. Amara's stomach dropped, the lie a guillotine, threatening not. Just jail, but institutionalization, her autonomy gutted in a stroke. She ducked into a crowd, her torn coat blending with travelers, her arm throbbing but her mind sharp. The officers slowed, scanning, their eyes missing her in the chaos. She'd escaped the needle, the cuffs, but Hensley's reach was tightening, his lies now a physical cage. She needed an ally, a voice beyond the airport's grip, and a public. Phone booth, her burner gone, her options razor-thin, was her only shot. The terminal stretched before her, a maze of glass and betrayal, but Amara moved forward, her heels a broken rhythm, her resolve a fire against the cold. Hensley thought he'd broken her, but she'd burn his empire yet one desperate step at a time. Amara Kendall wove through the pulsing chaos of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her torn coat flapping, her bruised arm throbbing from the clinic's near-sedation nightmare. The police pursuit, Hensley's mental health risk lie, still echoed in her ears, their sirens fading but their threat lingering like a noose. Her first-class seat, briefcase, lounge access, digital accounts, reputation, evidence, board trust, and physical safety had been stripped away, each blow more savage. Designed to obliterate her $600 million Zurich deal and her existence as Apex Vanguard's CEO. The crumpled deal documents in her pocket, their ink a bleeding relic, were all she carried now, her burner phone smashed, her options razor-thin. Yet Amara pressed on, her heels scraping unevenly, aiming for a public phone booth near Gate E7, a desperate bid to alert a federal regulator before Hensley's lies buried her alive. The terminal roared, boarding calls, suitcase wheels, a barista's shout, but Amara felt cornered, every shadow a trap, her resolve a flickering flame against the storm. The phone booth was a grimy relic, its glass smudged, its receiver dangling like a lifeline in the terminal's neon glow. Amara slipped inside, her breath ragged. the bruise pulsing under her sleeve, a map of every fight. Plane escort, bag search, digital lockout, false arrest, corporate betrayal, hired thugs. She had no ID, no phone, just her memory and a number. Burned into her mind. Elena Torres, a regulator with the Department of Transportation, a contact from a past deal who'd owe her a listen. The booth's air was stale, thick with the scent of old coins and sweat. But Amara grabbed the receiver, her fingers trembling as she punched in Torres's secure line. Each ring was a heartbeat, the terminal's noise, gate buzzers, a child's cry, a businessman's laugh. Fading as the call connected, Torres's voice crisp, wary. "Torres." "Elena, it's Amara Kendall," she said, her voice low, urgent, cutting through the static. "O'Hare's targeting me. Racial profiling, fraud setups, violence. I need you to pull airline records now." Torres paused, her tone sharpening. "Amara, you're at O'Hare. I saw the post. Fraud claims. What's happening?" Amara's chest tightened, the viral smear still spreading. But she pushed forward, detailing the abuses, Hensley's name, the stolen bag, the doctored emails, the clinic's needle. "It's systemic," she said, her words a controlled burn. "They're erasing me to kill my deal. File a probe, Elena. I'm out of time." Torres's keyboard clicked, a promise of action, and Amara's heart lifted. She was close, so close to breaking Hensley's web. The booth's glass rattled, and Amara froze, her eyes darting outside. Victor Hensley stood there, no longer a pale shadow but flesh and blood, his tailored suit crisp, his smirk cold as steel. Flanked by two armed guards, badges glinting, hands on holsters, he loomed like a predator who'd cornered his prey. The taller guard, his face scarred from the fax station, kicked the door open, the glass shuddering but holding. Hensley stepped forward, his voice smooth, venomous. "Hang up, Kendall," he said, loud enough for Torres to hear, "or I pin terrorism on you. Feds, headlines, life sentence." Amara's stomach dropped, the threat a guillotine, worse than the clinic's needle, designed to silence her forever. Her hand tightened on the receiver, Torres's voice crackling. "Amara, who's that?" Amara's mind raced, every instinct screaming to flee, but the booth was a cage, the guards' guns a wall she couldn't breach. She pictured her Zurich team, the deal's pulse fading, her legacy gutted by this final lie. Yet she refused to fold. Her defiance a fire Hensley couldn't douse. She spoke into the phone, her voice steady, lethal. "Eleanor, record this. Victor Hensley, O'Hare Ops, threatening terrorism charges to stop my report. Live stream it." She didn't have a stream, but the bluff landed. Hensley's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing, as if her audacity cracked his script. Torres's voice sharpened. "I'm logging it. Stay safe." Amara hung up, her hands trembling but her posture unbroken, facing Hensley like a queen before a usurper. The scarred guard lunged, his fist grazing her shoulder, but Amara dodged, her heels skidding, the booth's walls closing in. "You're done," Hensley snarled, his composure slipping, his guards circling tighter. "One call and you're a national threat." Amara's bruise throbbed, her body screaming, but her mind was a blade, slicing through panic. She'd sent the alert, planted a seed with Torres, but Hensley's desperation meant he'd risk everything to stop her now. She needed to broadcast her truth, to turn his trap into her weapon. Her eyes flicked to a terminal screen nearby, flashing. Gate updates hackable if she could reach it. "You're scared," she said, her voice a taunt, buying time. "You know I've got you." Hensley's radio crackled, his voice barking orders, and the terminal shifted. A security lockdown, sirens wailing, gates sealing, travelers freezing in confusion. "Full sweep," he said into the mic, his eyes locked on Amara. "Suspect at E7, armed and dangerous." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs, the lie a death sentence worse than sedation, painting her as a public menace. The booth's glass shook as travelers scattered, their phones flashing, some shouting, "She's there." The scarred guard grabbed her arm, his grip iron dragging her toward the door. But Amara twisted, her elbow catching his jaw, a fleeting wind that cost her balance. The second guard pinned her, his gun grazing her ribs, its cold weight a promise of finality. The lockdown's sirens blared louder, red lights flashing, sealing Amara inside a terminal-turned-prison. Travelers pressed against walls, their fear a mob's edge, some pointing, others filming. Their judgment a noose tightening around her. A white woman in a blazer clutching a laptop stared from the crowd, her eyes wide but her steps retreating, leaving Amara to drown. The disparity burned, her race a target, their safety assured, while she faced guns for daring to exist. Amara's breath hitched, her bruise screaming, but she faced Hensley, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're exposed," she said, each word a vow. "This ends with you, not me." Hensley's smirk returned, but it was brittle, his guard's grips tightening as if her defiance shook their core. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss. "You're nothing now," he said, his radio buzzing with confirmations. Gates locked, feds alerted, her name a terrorist's brand. Amara's mind scrambled, calculating, fight and she'd die, surrender and she'd vanish. She needed the terminal screen, a way to hijack the system, to broadcast her truth before Hensley's lie consumed her. The booth's walls pressed. In the sirens a deafening pulse, but Amara stood tall, her resolve afire against the dark. She'd lost everything but her will, and she'd use it to burn his empire down, one desperate move at a time. Amara Kendall stood pinned in the shattered phone booth of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2, her bruised arm throbbing, her torn coat a tattered flag of her war against Victor Hensley's relentless machine. The terminal lockdown, sirens blaring, gates sealed, travelers panicking, had turned the airport into a cage. Hensley's terrorism lie branding her a public enemy, his armed guards' guns grazing her ribs, their threat a heartbeat from ending her. Her first-class seat, briefcase, lounge access, digital accounts, reputation, evidence, board trust, safety and freedom, had been stripped away, each blow a calculated strike to kill her $600 million Zurich deal and erase her as Apex Vanguard's CEO. The crumpled deal documents in her pocket, their ink a fading whisper, were all she carried now, her body a canvas of battles, plane escort, bag search, digital lockout, false arrest, corporate betrayal, hired thugs, sedation, attempt. Yet Amara's eyes burned with defiance, her mind a blade slicing through despair, locked on a terminal screen across the concourse, flashing gate updates, her last chance to broadcast her truth and burn Hensley's empire to ash. The booths. Glass walls shook as the scarred guard tightened his grip, his gun's cold metal pressing harder, while Hensley loomed outside, his tailored suit pristine, his smirk a mask of victory. "Are you finished, Kendall?" he hissed, his voice cutting through the siren's wail, his radio buzzing with orders to neutralize the threat. Travelers cowered against walls, their phones filming, some shouting, "Stop her!" Their fear a mob's edge, fed by Hensley's lie that painted Amara as a terrorist. A white woman in a blazer clutched her laptop nearby, her eyes darting but her feet rooted. Her silence a contrast to Amara's fight, her race a shield Amara couldn't claim. The second guard, his holster glinting, twisted her arm, pain flaring. But Amara refused to buckle, her voice steady, lethal. "You're the threat," she said, each word a vow, her gaze flicking to the screen, its glow a beacon in the chaos. She'd bluffed a live stream to her lawyer in the booth, buying time. But the seed she'd planted with Elna Torres, the regulator, was her real weapon, if she could amplify it. The screen, hackable with Apex's backdoor codes she'd memorized, could broadcast her recorded evidence. Snippets from her burner phone, saved to a cloud server before its destruction, detailing Hensley's abuses. She needed seconds, a distraction, to reach it. Her eyes caught a fire alarm on the booth's wall, its red lever a gamble. She lunged, pain screaming in her arm, and yanked it, the screech piercing the terminal, sprinklers erupting, water soaking the crowd. The guards flinched, their grips loosening, and Amara broke free, her heels skidding on wet tiles, dodging their hands as she sprinted toward the screen, travelers scattering like leaves in her wake. Hensley roared, "Grab her!" His composure cracking, his guards charging, their boots splashing through puddles. Amara reached the screen, a digital billboard above Gate E7, its updates frozen in the lockdown. Her fingers flew across its maintenance panel, hidden behind a sign punching in Apex's override code. her own design, a fail-safe from her tech days. The screen flickered, her heart pounding as the system loaded, travelers shouting, some filming, others fleeing, their chaos a shield. The scarred guard lunged, his gun raised, but a traveler, a young black man in a hoodie, his eyes wide, shoved a luggage cart into his path, toppling bags, buying Amara a heartbeat. She nodded at him, a silent pact, and hit enter, the screen. Blazing to life with her cloud feed, her voice spilling out. "This is Amara Kendall," the recording boomed, echoing over sirens. "Targeted by Victor Hensley, O'Hare operations for my race, my power." Clips flashed. Larson's bag search, Carter's lounge denial, Patel's identity theft lie, the fax station's shove, Hensley's booth threat, all stitched together, undeniable. The crowd froze, phones dropping, whispers turning to gasps, as her face, bruised, defiant, filled the screen, naming abuses, linking Hensley to fraud, profiling, violence. "He stole my deal, my name," she said on screen, "but not my truth." Travelers turned, some shouting at the guards, others filming anew, their fear flipping to fury. A tide shifting against Hensley's lie. Hensley's smirk vanished, his face paling as he barked into his radio. "Cut it!" But the screen held, Amara's code unbreakable. The second guard grabbed her arm, his gun jabbing her side, but the crowd surged, a woman in a scarf yelling, "Let her go!" Others joining, their phones now weapons, live-streaming the truth. The young man in the hoodie pushed forward, guiding Amara free, his voice low. "Run, sister." She stumbled through the mob, water soaking her coat, her bruise screaming. But her heart soared. The terminal was hers now, its pulse hers to command. She reached a service door, slipping through as the guards fought the crowd, their power crumbling, Hensley's shouts drowned by the roar. Outside, in a quiet corridor, Amara leaned against a wall, her breath ragged, her mind racing. The broadcast had worked, her evidence viral. But Hensley wasn't done. He'd chased twist lie again. She needed to end it, to pull the deal's plug, to prove she'd never been a victim. Her memory held one last card, Apex's Zurich contract, a kill switch she'd built in secret, tied to her voice alone. She found a maintenance phone, its line secure, and dialed her chief of staff, her voice steady, commanding. "Cancel Zurich," she said, the words a thunderclap. "Full withdrawal, 600 million, effective now, no negotiations." Her staffer gasped, but complied, the deal's death knell ringing across continents, O'Hare's airline tanking. Billions in fallout, not millions, but the screen's truth hid a deeper shock. Amara wasn't just a CEO. She'd been a covert regulator planted by a shadow federal task force to test corporate ethics, her humiliation, a sting to expose. O'Hare's rot. Every blow, plane escort, bag search, digital lockout, arrest threat, sedation attempt, was bait, her resilience the trap, Hensley's racism the proof. The broadcast wasn't luck, it was her endgame coded years ago, her deal a decoy to draw out corruption. She'd won not by surviving but by orchestrating, her victory rewriting aviation law, mandating audits, toppling boards. Yet as she slipped into the corridor's shadows, her coat dripping, her bruise fading, she vanished, her name a whisper, her next target unknown, a ghost already hunting anew. Hensley's arrest came swiftly, cuffs snapping on his wrists as feds stormed the terminal, guided by Torres's probe, triggered by Amara's call. The crowd cheered, some weeping, others filming, their phones now torches, lighting the dark. The airline's stock crashed, its gates silent, its brand ash, billions. Bled in hours, not millions, as Zurich's investors fled, Apex's withdrawal a seismic quake. Amara's evidence, cloud-saved, regulator-bound, sparked congressional hearings, new laws banning profiling, forcing O'Hare to its knees, its systems gutted, rebuilt under scrutiny. The young man in the hoodie, the woman in the scarf, became voices in a movement, their footage viral, their courage a spark Amara had lit. She didn't watch the fallout, didn't linger for applause. Her deal was dead, her role exposed, but her fight wasn't. Other airports, other empires waited, their flaws her next prey. The terminal screens looped her broadcast, her face a fleeting icon, but Amara was gone, her heels silent, her bruise a memory, her resolve a fire no one could touch. She'd torn down a system, not with screams but with precision, her sacrifice a blueprint for change, her anonymity a promise of more to come. The Zurich boardroom stood empty, its deal a ghost, but the world shifted, laws tightened, and Amara, Kendall, whoever she'd been, was already someone else, somewhere else, ready to strike again. Amara Kendall's battle in Chicago O'Hare unveils profound truths about resilience and systemic injustice. Her story teaches us that courage isn't just defiance, it's strategy forged in fire. Facing relentless racist attacks, plane escort, bag sabotage, digital erasure, false arrests and corporate betrayal, Amara didn't crumble. She calculated, turning traps into weapons. Her triumph shows that power lies in persistence, in documenting every slight, in refusing to be silenced even when the world brands you a villain. She flipped a $600 million deal's collapse into a billion-dollar reckoning, proving one voice can topple empires when it speaks truth. The second lesson is systemic rot's depth. Amara's fight exposed how racist biases, guards' smirks, clerks' dismissals, boardroom doubts, aren't isolated but woven into structures, from airport protocols to corporate boards. Her covert, regulator role revealed institutions often protect their own, shielding figures like Victor Hensley until undeniable evidence forces change. Yet change came, new laws, audits, accountability, because she refused erasure, a reminder that dismantling injustice requires relentless exposure, not just outrage. Finally, Amara's vanishing act teaches sacrifice's cost. Her victory reshaped aviation, but she walked away, a ghost hunting new battles, her personal toll unspoken. It asks us to honor those who fight unseen, to question who pays for justice. Her story isn't just a win, it's a call to see, to act, to ensure no one else fights alone. What moment in Amara's fight hit you hardest and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you stand against injustice, and subscribe to catch more stories of defiance. Share this to spark change, and thank you for joining us. Here's to building a world where truth prevails. Stay bold, stay true,